Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all the support, the emails, tweets, messages you've sent my way, the show's way. I read them all. I appreciate all of them. Love hearing from you guys. Keep those coming. One of the things about this show and doing this podcast, which is kind of fun, is when looking at like the data and the metrics of the show, I know that it has a lot of younger coaches, and I appreciate all coaches who are listening, but the metrics say that we got a lot of younger coaches, people who are, in their 20s, people who are just starting their coaching career, maybe have a few years in, 1 year in, and I think that's awesome. And I think that it's awesome that today we have a topic to talk about, which is about basically giving advice for young coaches, and with my guest who's going to talk about his experience kind of being, thrown in the fire at a young age coaching and navigating that, and being able to share his story, his experience, learning from the mistakes he's made, ups and downs, all that sort of stuff. And I think that this is just a real fun episode that we're going to be able to talk about. And I'll have some things I can share as well, being in this coaching profession since I was 22 myself. So if you're a young coach, if you're a new coach, or somebody who is, and definitely share that with them as well. But that's what we're going to get into today is just some general advice for young coaches, things to think about, and hopefully get your program where you want it to be, and get your coaching career off to a great start where you want it to be as well. So very happy to be joined by the head boys coach at North Tonawanda High School. Very happy to be joined by Coach Chris Juergens today. Coach, appreciate you being able to come on and share some wisdom with us today. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am fantastic, Coach. Let's start with your basketball and your coaching journey. I know that there's been some little twists and turns along the way, but talk us through where this game of basketball has taken you, and how you ended up at North Tonawanda.
So basketball has been a crucial part of my life, probably from as long as I can remember. So after graduating high school, where I played varsity hoops and all that, and then played a few other sports as well, I went to college, not really quite sure what I wanted to get done in my life, so to speak. My older sister actually was a phys ed teacher and a coach at a time. She's now actually an athletic director at one of our local high schools. I started helping her out as a JV girls assistant my first 3 years of college. So just kind of, being there, helping out a little bit, when I could with class and work and all that. And then that led to me when I was 21 years old. I got my first assistant job at a school called Royalton Heartland High School. I was able to get in there through a friend of mine who was a former Division III coach, and we were working a similar camp. We kind of hit it off talking about hoops, and then needed an assistant, so I was able to jump on there. So I was there for 2 years, 1 year as a modified coach and varsity assistant, and 2 years working with the varsity. During that point in time, I was getting my teaching credentials done, so I graduated with a physical education degree from one of our local colleges. I was subbing at Roy Hart. I got hired by our inner city district in Buffalo, and then I was also fortunate enough at 23 to be named the head boys varsity basketball coach at Pioneer. At Pioneer, I'll let you talk. I was a little long-winded. I'll let you get some stuff in.
Oh no, you're good, Coach. Keep going. I was just saying it's incredible to hear like how many different types of positions you've had. Like you've kind of taken coaching roles of all different sorts and all different levels. You kind of been all over the sides of the bench in the coaching profession.
It's been a journey for sure. So at 23, I was fortunate to get the job at Pioneer. My first year, we were very successful, able to win 13 games. I was fortunate to have a pretty, good group of seniors and some talent on the roster. But also what people sometimes don't know about that was we were an A-size school. So up here, that's like roughly over 1,000 kids in the high school, if not more. And we only had 8 kids on our varsity squad. I was the 4th coach in about 5 years. They had a coach for a long time. Then it was kind of a revolving door. The area where the school is at wasn't really centrally located. So if you don't have a teacher in the building that does it, sometimes it can be hard to get a coach, as we've all been there before. And then I worked there for 2 years. I'd say I had a ton of ups and downs. It was an hour ride from my house. So I was teaching in our inner city and driving there every day. So it just got to be a lot. So then I took a step back and accepted a JV role in the district I was teaching at. I was there for 2 years. at a school called City Honors. And actually, at the time, my sister was a head girls coach, and I taught the school across the street. So it was a good fit for me. And after having my varsity experience, it was kind of good to have a reset, see a different level, because what most people always told me was strange was I went from assistant and only modified jumping straight to varsity. So I got thrown to the fire, so to speak. And as from looking at it now, 7 years later, from being 23 and now 30 years old, I can look back at I did right, things I did wrong, and even like lessons that just learned and have stuck with me ever since. But
Awesome.
but then after 2 years of JV, I helped out for a year at a private school. One of my buddies, the head coach. My job at the JV school was kind of dependent if you were in the building. Unfortunately, someone in the building wanted it, so I kind of got pushed out there. So obviously, it wasn't like oh, we don't want to get rid of you. It's just the way the contracts were and that how it worked in the district.
Mm-hmm.
Then I did that for a year, and then I happened to get hired at North Tonawanda High School, which was one of the suburban districts for people that kind of know the Buffalo, West New York area. North Tonawanda is like the middle point between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. Um, Pretty rich basketball history as of late. The coach I did just recently replace is the all-time winningest coach in school history. Led them to their second ever sectional championship. So then yeah, I got hired as a teacher there. I hopped on staff. I was the modified assistant and varsity assistant for a season. Going into last season, I thought that was going to be my role, but coach decided to step down. You know, he has a young kid, young family, raisins, and I think he may have saw something in me or the JV coach that made him realize maybe it was time because he knew the program was going to be taken care of. And then I got named our new head coach that season. And then this will be entering my second season there as well. And to kind of piggyback on my different roles. So obviously the physical education teacher, a lot of times we get put in different roles. I've
Yeah.
also coached volleyball for 5 years at the JV modified or varsity level. I've coached varsity cross country the past 2 seasons. I've also coached outdoor track for 8 years. So I look at all my coaching experience, not even just in basketball, but in other sports at all levels, which has kind of helped me formulate not just my philosophy, but like all the lessons I've learned and kind of formed me to who I am today.
One thing I'm really curious about what it is that you just said was what do you take? I'm always fascinated on picking the brain of coaches who coach multiple sports. I used to coach softball and volleyball myself, so I totally get that coaching multiple things, being busy year round. But I'm curious about what can you or what have you taken from coaching other sports that you can then use when you coach basketball?
Well, I think the number one thing people always tell the kids is don't pigeonhole yourself. So in a way, we tell these kids don't specialize in one sport. And then obviously for all our other head coaches listening, running our own programs, an own full-time job in itself. But being younger, not having as many family commitments and stuff at the time, I've been able to really just dive into coaching and just it almost just helped me learn how to coach basketball even through the different sports because a lot of things correlate, whether it's the physical side from training to getting athletes prepared to even just handling with issues. So an example I can think of is in basketball, you have 12 to 15 guys on your team, and you need I may think of a better word for this, but I'm probably not going to find it, but more harmony amongst the group. You can't really freelance, you can't really go solo, and you're coaching everyone to the team at all point. Where I coach
Hmm.
track and field, where there's individual events and then there's relays and team scoring and individuals. And then it's a whole different mindset. And it's kind of helped me pick the brain of some kids where in a basketball side, I thought they were being selfish, but just this is how they're trying to get to their goal. So kind of find that happy medium as to how to coach these kids to live up to like the standard we're trying to set as coaches and also keep the team as one.
Oh, no, that's awesome. It's so interesting when you're coaching, as whether it's something like a track or an individual like level sport, because the mentality, I think, at least in my experience, I've kind of noticed the mentality of the way that you coach a player who's doing something that's a lot more individualistic and it's on them. It's just a different dynamic and it's a different way you kind of go about that conversation in terms of their mental preparedness or their emotional preparedness when you know it's not a team thing that they're doing. It's completely on them. I'm always really fascinated about players, especially high school players who can really like step up to those moments and know that all eyes are on them and still be able to deliver.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. As someone who was also a track and field athlete, I think that helped me in my team sports that I played growing up because in track and field, when it is just on you, you have to step up. Sometimes when you're playing a team sport, it's the same guy stepping up, and when that guy doesn't step up, some people don't know what to do. And I've kind
Yeah.
of seen that with having some kids that we could say quote unquote have more individualized personality, but they've also done more individualized sports. They live for that moment.
Yeah.
And these some nights you need that kid to step up. And then I'll say, which is a great thing to have, is when you have multiple kids can step up.
No, 100%.
Obviously,
Keep
obviously,
going.
we always say there's one basketball, but when you have multiple guys that can be successful in multiple situations, and even you don't want not everyone in the gym is going to know who your last shot come from. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, to have multiple weapons, multiple options to go for, definitely. Coach, I think we'll probably touch on this in some aspect a little bit later, but I wanted to specifically ask because I wanted to make sure that I let you address it about your X's and O's coaching philosophy. Talk about what it is that you like to run currently, and has it always been your X's and O's philosophy, or is that adapted or changed throughout the years?
I will say my X's and O philosophy have adapted like night and day from year one of coaching to now. So when I first started coaching, I wanted to install what my system, what I like to run, what I like to teach. So a lot of that from an offensive sake is two guard offense from like John Beeline, a local college coach around here uses that. I love that stuff, but also I had to sit back one time. I was trying to coach it to a team where it didn't suit them. So even though I have, this offense in my head, this mind, how I approach offense now is make it easy for all the kids to understand what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, how can we formulate together for an offensive game plan. And then a lot of times it's the evolution of the game too. Like I can think, I'm only 30 years old, but I can think 10, 15 years ago, it was post driven, get it inside, flex offense. And now it's kind of evolved into like spacing and concepts, which I'll admit when I ran last year, that's what we typically been running with the previous coach. And it was an adjustment for me because I like having my play sheet, knowing what to call, but also when you're coaching high school basketball and you're not, we'll say at a college level where all those players, basketballs are number one, you got to make it simple and something that's easy for all kids to understand and learn. And if you're going to run however many set plays and they got to know this concept and this, it's going to be more difficult to teach. So what I've learned is almost less is more, but also, for example, right now we do a lot of delay 5-out stuff with my current team. And installing it now, going through it, I just see options I know we can run. We're going to be able to get there eventually. We got to get, obviously the basis of stuff down and learn, the beginning stages. But I know that stuff we can run. Is there stuff that I would love to run, but I'm like, it's not going to be successful for us. So it's just being able to really gauge your team and coach to your strengths and abilities.
It's one of those lessons that I think a lot of us kind of have to learn, no matter what age that we start coaching. And I think that that's kind of a interesting kind of correlation or tie into that topic, right? Is like at least I know I was this way, and I don't know how much you were too. Where like, well, you did mention this, like you know what you know what you like think looks good. Like there's an offense or a defense, like man, like this looks really good. I really want to run this, and like I'm not even gonna like. It doesn't matter what players I have. I'm gonna run this because this is a system I like. And then you get players in who either can't do it or you just don't have like the right like matchups for it or it's just not being taught correctly or you're the way that you want to teach it just doesn't click because it's your first or second time trying to teach it and you're not teaching it well. But I feel like a lot of us as coaches kind of go through that situation where we really like something as an idea and so we really want it to work and we try to make it work no matter what, even if we don't necessarily have the pieces or ability to do so.
Yes, sir. I've been through that plenty of times. And also to kind of piggyback off that, it's staying true to who you are. So obviously when I first started coaching, I was a little younger, all that stuff, even just how I approach the game now and how my demeanor is even at practice, the sidelines, it's completely changed. I would say more when I was younger, I thought I had to earn respect and I was trying to be something I wasn't. And then now
Yeah.
as I've gotten older and also one of the first times I've been a teacher in the district and even in the same building and with the kids. So these kids know me as a teacher and a coach. So they see both sides of it where some people just knew me as, the coach that came in through the back door that wasn't teaching in the district, which I believe being a teacher in the district is a huge proponent because you're able to really connect with the kids on more of like a student level and then like an athletic level.
No, well said, well put. All right, coach, talk to us here about your kind of journey as you kind of just started in this coaching profession. When you were a young coach, just starting out, early 20s, talk about some of the difficulties you faced? What were some of these struggles and situations that you just kind of had to navigate by just being so young and just starting out on your career?
I would say just saying not having confidence in myself, but having confidence in every facet of the job. So when I was 23 and I got hired at Pioneer, I never doubted my basketball knowledge. I never doubted my work ethic. Those were two things I knew were I was going to focus on and pound home. What I didn't think to have to work on was how do you build a relationship with parents? How do you build rapport with them? You know what I mean? Because as a
Yeah.
young coach, they kind of looked at me like, oh, we can talk to you, we can say things to you, and then kind of setting those boundaries as well. Um, I would say, and then also kind of going back to my one of my previous points as a young coach was figuring out how to approach every situation and being consistent. So as a young coach, I made a lot of mistakes. We all have. Well, I'll probably make mistakes this year in year 13. It's inevitable. We're not perfect, but I just look back on really just example I can think of is just even how to talk to parents about addressing like issues. So I didn't think there'd be parent issues personally, and I look back and thinking this is stupid just because the parents would see, oh, I'm working hard, I'm dedicated. Yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but also I was told this quote by someone once. It's called blindness by the love of their child.
Mm.
Everything is about their kid, whether they're a parent that completely gets it, or maybe a parent that's not on board with everything the team is. They're going to look at something and it's going to be about their kid. They're going to look at how their kid's being affected by it in both negative and positive ways.
Interesting. I am curious about where did you get that realization where it's like, oh, like you had the confidence, you had the confidence in yourself, you had the confidence in your knowledge, but where was that like first like moment of like, oh, this is like much different or much more involved than I expected? Was it that like first parent interaction like you mentioned about? Was there like something where it's like, whoa, like my knowledge isn't of the total coaching profession is not exactly complete like I thought maybe it was going to be?
I would say probably one of the first parent interactions because I set rules and protocols for it. And then the first time someone broke it and they were just talking to me and I just realized what's going on and happening, I was like, oh, this is a conversation that's not supposed to happen.
Mm.
And then just seeing how that progressed and then being like, oh, this is something as a coach I need to be aware of how I approach things and how I act at all times can lead to, interactions with people.
So what do you do now with your parent interactions after you built on that? When you're having conversations with parents or you're having like the parent meeting at the beginning of the season or whatever the case may be, what have you learned and what have you kind of taken from your previous experiences to kind of make it better or more successful for you when you are talking to parents?
Well, I would say this, the number one thing I've started doing is just open up every meeting, like parent meeting or anything, is that look, I will talk about X, Y, and Z, but here's when I will talk about something like playing time. Here's why. Is more explain the why. If you just hand people a set of rules and they don't agree with them, the chance of them not following them, especially if they think you're doing something wrong or don't agree with what you're doing, is high. If you show reasoning and you show all that and you show willingness to also just be open with parents, not even just so much about the playing time, just show. For example, what I like to do at the parent meeting is discuss, hey, for example, I will discuss playing time 24 hours after a game. That's one of our school rules. But also, the one thing I do add is I want the kid to come talk to me first. Because one of my first times of parent interaction, the parent came up to me and the kid, Ned, never said boo to me. The kid never showed any signs of being upset towards his playing time, anything. So, me being younger, I was confused like, okay, the kid's not saying anything. So, why is the parent? So,
Yeah.
then also it helps you build a relationship with those kids, knowing like, hey, you need to come talk to me first. And then I think just showing the willingness to talk and then talking and the kids know I can talk to them just shows it kind of like deletes that step because then it's like, all right, the kids know they have to come talk to me first. And then if it's something where a parent has to come talk to me and it has to be addressed, then we, obviously can be handled.
That's so interesting. That's like one of those things where I've been in that situation too, and I realized that like there was a lot of self-reflection for me to think about like was I not open enough or what happened so that a kid didn't feel like they were able to talk to me and all of a sudden like a parent's talking to me and that kid has never had a conversation. I know like that was something that I feel I've really thought about and really kind of addressed over the past few years in particular was to make sure that like my players felt comfortable talking to me. I guess I always assumed that they did, but I've had similar situations where, you know, a player, I'll find out something about them later or some situation about them later that like I should have probably known about a lot earlier, but for some reason that conversation never happened or that player never talked to me. And it's really interesting to think that like you think your guys, your girls will want to talk to you and let you know what's going on and be open about everything and you know trust talking to you, but no, you're absolutely right. That's not the case, and I think it's you know important to make sure that your players know that like, hey, I want to talk to you, I want to hear from you, or you know even put players in situations where you're having weekly meetings or that you're always checking in with guys.
Yeah, 100%. I think if the guys or girls know you have their back and know they can come and talk to you, that just eliminate 90% of your headaches. Obviously, if there's, situations that are unavoidable, which we've all done in coaching, whether it's with a kid or a parent, there's just those situations you gotta, deal with it and then grow from it.
Yeah, 100%. When it comes to your coaching philosophy, the what you believe in as a coach, as that ever shifted from your first year to now? How is your belief on like what it means to have a good team, how to build a team, culture, all of that stuff, kind of that, you know, big picture philosophical stuff. How has that changed, if at all, from your first year to what your coaching philosophy is now?
So an example I can think of is as far as like off-season commitment. So, for example, this summer we had a pretty decent summer. Most of the guys were always there. There's some guys that are multiple sport athletes, and some guys have to work. It's just being able to find time to get them in the gym and make it work, and also understanding that all right, most of us who are coaches and are passionate about whether you're a head basketball coach, head baseball coach, head football coach. Typically, when you were a student athlete, you were dedicated. That was your life. Kind of going back to the college point, not all of them are thinking, oh, summer workouts for basketball are the most important thing to them. You have to kind of sell it and make it fun to them, but also realize that these kids do have other things going on. And how do you maximize the time in the gym? And also, how do you draw them into the gym more? I would say when I was a younger coach, I'd be more disappointed if kids weren't there. But now, if kids aren't there, and like, for example, a summer league game, you have 5 varsity guys, 2 JV guys, instead of being ticked off that, oh, so and so isn't there. It's all right. Well, we have these 5, and these so and so JV guys are here to get better. So it's also looking at it from as the
Positive
varsity
viewpoint.
coach, as the varsity coach's standpoint, as the program head standpoint, because the philosophy I've always taken, this has probably never changed, and I was taught this by a coach at a young age. Doesn't matter who's in a gym. If it's 1 kid or 30 kids, it's you gotta give the same energy, and those kids are and respect the work ethic of the kids who are there, because the kids who are there obviously want to be there and are trying to get better. Typically, you don't have kids showing to summer workouts that don't care about getting better.
Yeah, you would hope not, right? You would hope you're coming in for a reason, but you know that's a real good point that you mentioned. And honestly, I feel like even now where I'm at my coaching career, I still am not perfect at that where I sometimes think about like who's not there or what we have coming up ahead or you know only got 6 or 7, why don't I have 10 or 12 versus like you said like well I have 6 or 7 and I can use that time to get those 6 or 7 better. And I think it kind of speaks to this idea of you know being present in the moment, right? Like coaching where it is you are, be where your feet are, sort of thing. And I imagine that that's something that maybe gets a little bit easier with time as you get more and more used to situations. Things aren't maybe as overwhelming or frustrating to you, and you can kind of just be where you need to be, sort of thing. And it sounds like that's something that you've kind of really grown on and worked on and are doing a great job with now. Is just kind of focusing on, hey, these are the people that are here. I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to get them better.
Oh yeah, 100%. An example from this past summer it even happened was we had a summer scrimmage set up at our place. We didn't have as many varsity guys as I would have liked. We had a mix of JV kids and actually a kid who's on the fringe of trying out, an athlete that hasn't played basketball in the last couple of years. We had them play, and we played a pretty good school. Uh, school that's decent size, bigger than us, historically pretty good program. They kicked our butts a little bit in the summer, but also it was good for my guys to see like they had all 13 of their guys it was there. So it was instead of being mad like, oh, this wasn't a waste of time. Oh, the school came in and whooped our butt. It was, oh, well, We had these guys in the gym, they got better and they got to kind of fight through that adversity of, okay, we don't have these guys here. What can we do to be successful? And then there were some quarters where we severely struggled, and then there was quarters where we won a couple of the quarters, or even, it was just a lot better of a fight. So it's just learning through that adversity. Then mindset I take it now is, okay, it's the off season. We're learning this now. Hopefully build on this so these type of losses don't come in the season. Regardless if it's, all 13 of your guys are there or your top 5 are there. It's that every time in the gym stepping on the court, they're getting better, and it's an experience for them. And then even when it comes to summer league, sometimes, summer basketball, summer league, attendance can be hit or miss. I'd say in our program, it's been an expectation before I was there. So we do have pretty good attendance, but, there's always been times where, like you said, so-and-so were here, would have been fine. But also, it's summertime. We're here just to get better. When it comes to regular season, if we're having these kind of issues, then that's a whole different story.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that that's also, a good point, right? Obviously, the expectations that you have, for the summer should be clearly laid out. Obviously, in the season, a lot different as well in terms of especially things like on time and attendance wise. No, I completely agree. Coach, what is like been the process for you to kind of find your I guess what we kind of call like your coaching voice. I feel like when we kind of start out in this profession, maybe we're not the clearest of communicators. Maybe we're not speaking with as much, conviction as we need to, or our leadership skills aren't there. Just that, authoritative kind of, I guess, personality, for a lack of a better term, definitely takes some time to develop. So I was curious about when did you start to really feel comfortable in that sort of coaching role, and what do you think kind of had to happen, or what did it take for your kind of coaching voice, so to speak, to really kind of come out?
So I'd say my voice is still fairly new as far as what I've been doing right now.
Hmm.
When I first started, I was more of a yeller. I was more animated, but I'll be honest. And like I said, sometimes I wonder what I was thinking this, but I was a young coach. I almost thought that's how I had to be based on seeing other people coach. And also with being young, that's how I was going to get the respect. But also what's helped me is being a teacher. How I build a relationship with kids in the classroom is kind of the approach I've taken with building rapport with my athletes. Naturally, I'm not a hothead. I'm not as much of a screamer as I tried to portray myself up to be. I have more of a lax personality now, and then also just being more relaxed and seeing the game now too. I don't coach with so much emotion. I look and I see the game more clearly instead of worry about what's going on and then we're throwing a little temper tantrum on the sideline. We've all been there. It's looking at, all right, waste my breath on this. What can I do to change this? Because obviously there's times where we get in games where we all feel, oh, this just isn't going right, or oh, these calls aren't going our way. But the biggest lesson I had to learn with that was the kids see what you're doing and then they think it's okay. So if they think, oh, coaches up and down, yelling at the officials, then they start doing it. And your kids are a reflection of you, and our team is a reflection of not just the school district, but the community. And I'd say as a young coach, that's something I think I only half understood. Like, obviously, I wanted to build the program. I wanted to make it part of the community, be doing all the right stuff in that regard. But as far as how I portrayed myself, do I think it was ever anything, oh my God, this is so negative, blah, blah, blah. But stuff I had to work on. And then that also comes with experience of coaching the games too. So now with entering my 4th varsity year and having 13 years of coaching experience and also in a wide array of sports, I've been in certain situations where, I've had to keep my cool. I've had to, sit back and reflect on, whether mistakes I've made and how big of an impact was my behavior and my even coaching style. And then now also by Eric Spolestra from Miami Heat was coaches have to adapt and change to the times, which we all hear is, oh, coaching isn't what it used to. Well, I think it's, change who the kids are. You have to
Yeah.
find what's best to be successful for those kids. So if you're naturally a yeller and your team can't handle it, well, then you have to figure out a way to communicate better. Just like going on like all the stuff like that.
It's really interesting the point that you brought up, right, about like your actions are kind of a reflection on you, because I think that's something that's tough. I think it's tough to you, especially if you're a coach, you kind of like wears your heart on your sleeve, and yeah, you're very emotional, you're very passionate, right? Because you care a lot about what it is that you do. But I think to your point, right, it's really easy also for that like passion and that excitement to spill over into kind of like unregulated emotion, and then you're kind of all over the place, and then you're not focused as much, and then your passion almost becomes a negative. And I think that finding that like balance where obviously you're very passionate and you're very like intensely engaged and really want what's best for your team, but at the same time also like remaining focused and calm and being like the coach who's mentally there to make the best decisions possible. It's not always easy and definitely takes time to develop.
Yeah, and then one thing I was told, sometimes silence speaks volumes. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Even with coaching, even though we want to correct all the time, point out this, point out that, sometimes playing through mistakes, playing through whistles is the best thing.
And actually, that brings up a question that just kind of popped in mind, and I think that this would be interesting to get your thoughts on too, coaches. What did you learn, or what was the process for you kind of learning in-game adjustments and in-game strategies? There's nothing quite like being in the game itself. And when you're a young coach, at least I can think of I can think of a lot of things that I wish I could apologize to my first couple teams about. But I'm curious for you, like, what was that process of being in the game for the first time as a coach, having to make adjustments, having to be aware of all the different things that were going on? What is kind of your process sort of been in terms of developing, in terms of your in-game coaching?
An example I can think for that kind of goes back to how my philosophies change, how I approach things have changed. So my first year as a varsity coach, I was dead set on us playing man to man. I'm like, we're gonna learn it, we're gonna do it. This is how we're gonna beat teams. First half of the season, some teams that beat us, it was struggling man to man. Also, we only had 8 guys, so me trying to play man to man clearly wasn't the best decision due to foul trouble and stuff like that. Uh, Switched to a zone defense, which I talked to the previous coach. I said that team can play the zone a certain way, and you might be able to sneak some wins. And honestly, we switched to a zone defense at Christmas time, and we played exclusively zone, and we started winning more games. So I think that was like the first time I saw it, because I was looking on film and I was pointing out what kids were doing wrong. Like, all right, you're not talking here. Oh, you're ball watching there, instead of, all right, we just aren't successful at this. And I think it took me obviously listening to advice from coaches I trust, not, listening to people in the crowd and all that. But it took, and then really reflecting and even just watching film differently. Started looking at, this is the plan. What did we do wrong? Oh, this is how the game went. What could I have done to change it? As a coaches, there's not much we can control, but when watching film and going back and self-reflecting, there's times in the game where decision we make could or could not change the outcome. And then it's just learning off that and then basing my next coaching practices and strategy all off of that is being able to really look at it, self-reflect, and stay objective to what the goal was, to obviously always win the game, all that, but stay objective to the point of, all right, this is my plan, and it's just not working.
Mhm.
It's also, and as a coach, sometimes it's a hard thing to accept. It's like almost telling a player that they think they should be playing more, or they think they have this role, and then explaining to them like, this is what your role and why. It's almost the same thing as a coach. It's like, all right, well, this is my plan. We're not being successful. I can't get mad at the kids that they can't do this. If I'm not teaching it right, or if it's just something that's not going to work, then me as the coach, I have to figure it out. And I think that as I've gone on and coached more teams, and obviously even the different sports I've had and different strategies have seen me, it's coaching to your kids' abilities rather than coaching to what you want done.
That's not, I imagine, I'm just kind of hearing you take this, that hearing you say has to be, I imagine, also a continual process that you're still going on, because that's a real tough thing to do, and that's a hard thing to master, what it is that you just said. I imagine even as you're still coaching, and I think of that too still, I'm in my 12th year now of coaching, that this is probably still like kind of an ongoing process that you're getting better at day by day, year by year.
Yes, and I was even talking to one of my assistants recently. I was thinking of a game last year where
Hmm.
a game still, in my opinion, I still think we should have won, but I'm
Yeah.
like, this is what we did wrong. And also I looked at, all right, I probably could have done this to kind of change it. Would it have changed the outcome? maybe, maybe not, but it's also just being able to self-reflect and look and be like, all right, this was the result. I know for now this is something I can do. And
Yeah.
just not being afraid of change. And it's like basically being comfortable. As a coach, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, and getting out of your comfort zone and being okay with those situations for sure. That brings up another good point. A lot of follow-up questions here that I kind of been thinking about um what have you done now, or what have you kind of learned about now in terms of um things about learning from like previous games, or learning from, things that you scout about, or your preparation? How has your process kind of evolved of kind of reflecting on what was good and what wasn't, and kind of also like preparing and scouting for upcoming games? Talk to us about kind of that journey in terms of kind of the mental, the reflection part and the preparation part, from when you started to kind of where it is that you're at now.
So my preparations kind of always stayed the same. I think that's just something I'm kind of type A about.
Hmm.
Even if it's a team, I don't think we have to watch a ton of film on, whether it's all right, we're overmatched or whatever the situation is. I still watch it. Even if I don't show the kids my full scouting report, I still do it for my own doing because I like knowing everything that goes on in the game. Like, so one of my players will read a scouting report and is not going to remember, oh, this kid goes left in this situation, or on this screen they do this. I need to know that, obviously, but sometimes it's all right. Am I giving the kids too much information? And like I kind of going back to is especially as a high school coach, put the kids in the spot to be successful and make it simple for them. But obviously, as your teams you grow and evolve, that's when you run more complicated things or different offenses. And then as far as preparation for opponents, kind of the same thing, almost less is more. Like when we go over scouting reports, it's more focusing on them. What do they do well? What can we take away? How can we control it rather than they do this, this, and this. We need to stop this and this. Yes, there's still some of those things that we need to stop them if we're going to be successful to even win, but it's just picking and choosing your battles instead of, all right, here's a scouting report of all 12 guys. Here's what they can do, blah, blah, blah. Say, all right, here's what they do well. Here's what we do well. Here's how we match up. Here's what we can do to be successful, and kind of just breaking it down more for them to be like, okay, this is what we need to do to be successful instead of remembering, all these little intricacies about it. And then
So
as far,
now I was just curious, just to follow up real quick,
yeah.
before I forget. Now when you're communicating with guys, how do you kind of determine now, like, what are the most important things when you're scouting and planning, and you're, laying out your guys the plan of attack? Now, how do you feel like you are now in terms of the communication with your guys?
Well, I always start with, like I said, what do we do well, both offensively and defensively? I portray to them, all right, here's what we do well, guys. We're still going to be able to do that, whether there's change to it or different than just showing them. And also just showing them, like, here's what we're doing and why. Because a lot of times the why is the biggest part for kids. Because sometimes, like, oh, well, coach is making a change. I don't understand. Like, it could be a lineup change because, oh, they have a bigger team. We're going to a bigger lineup. If you don't communicate that little change, that could cause problems. So obviously, I go, like, for example, one time last year, I changed the starting lineup for a game, and it was a kid that pretty much had started all year. He was pretty much a starter for us most of the time. I just decided to change it up to give the team a different look because the third time playing.
Mhm.
And then I communicated that to the kids, and they seemed to really like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Gotcha. Where I look in the past, where I would just be like, well, I'm the coach, this is what we're doing. Here's how it is. Then it's just like, oh, okay, then why is he changing things? Because the biggest thing with the kids is always going to be the why.
Yeah. No, players, right, are always going to be asking that, aren't they? They always want to know the why behind something, and I think that it's cool that they do that. And sometimes I forget to like make sure I bring that out of my players. Sometimes I want to tell them all this stuff, and then I'm like, don't, just do this X, Y, and Z. We're gonna work on this. We're gonna do this. But even if players don't say it, at least I know with my girls, if they don't even say it, they do want to know why, or in the back of their mind they're wondering why. And I know for me, throughout the years, I've really tried to make sure I explicitly explain the why behind everything, because I want my players to know why we're doing something. And if they still don't get it, or they're still or disagree or unsure about it, I want them to keep asking questions. I know for me that's been a big change from me from the beginning until where I'm at now.
Yeah, 100%. And then it just goes back to kind of with parents and the open communication. If you just lay out your plan and show your vision and explain, here's the rules, blah, 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 why, and all that, it just creates, okay, this guy, the coach clearly has a plan for what's going on. Then also it's like, all right, if he has all this going on and is showing we're doing this, this, and why, and he's following up and staying committed to that, then the parents kind of know what they signed up for.
Yeah.
Instead of just, not communicating most things, and then all of a sudden the season comes around, they're like, well, I didn't think it'd be like this. And that comes from even my experiences as like an AAU coach and helping with AAU programs, like the same thing. But it's like being a salesman. If you sell one thing, but it's actually another, that's when people have problems.
Definitely. Coach, like I mentioned, we have a lot of younger coaches who listen, a lot of newer coaches that listen, and one of the things that, I love to be able to do is be able to kind of, give them some insight on some things that they might not be ready for, or they might not necessarily expect about this profession. And so in your coaching career, when you were first starting, what were some other things that kind of took you by surprise? What were some things that you weren't really ready for that you had to kind of adjust to right away, or kind of learn from? So are there some other things that you can kind of share so that kind of our younger coaches listening might be able to be on the lookout for these sort of things, so to speak?
Well, I can say this. It's what I can think of as one of the things as a coach that breaks my heart is having to cut the kid.
Yeah.
Is you think about that, you think of, back years ago, sometimes there's just a list pointing out there wasn't conversations. And with me, whenever there's trials, whether a kid makes team or not, they always come in a room to have a conversation, whether it's about their role or, hey, unfortunately didn't make the team and here's why. I think just being able to navigate those conversations and be comfortable, because they are some of the harder conversations I've ever had. And some of the hardest ones I've had are kids that had probably nowhere near the skill to be on the team, but they showed up and they just busted their butt, and you just have to, they put their work in. You knew they tried hard. You could tell they want to be there. Then telling someone your hard work isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And just not taking that lightly.
So how do you have those conversations then? So how do you even broach that conversation with a kid when you have to make that tough decision?
As weird as I say, I try to keep it as short but informative as possible, because obviously once they hear the words "you're cut" or "you're fortunately not having on the team," sometimes that's all they hear.
That's shut down right after. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I always tell them, hey, if you don't want to talk now and you want to talk, tomorrow, or reach out and see the reasons why. My door is always open. And I've never had a kid come back after the fact and ask. Most of them usually is asked then. And and I'd say the first time I'd say it really broke my heart when I saw tears coming down a kid's face. And just,
Yeah.
and it's just, you feel terrible as a coach and as a human being too, because as coaches, we want kids that are be there and want to work hard. Sometimes it's like you look at those kids you're cutting, like, I wish the kid that has all the talent in the world right now had your heart and had your work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even
that's tough. Yeah.
that's not even throwing shade at a better player, because the better player just naturally is there, might not have to work as hard at his game, might not have to, do X, Y, and Z that this kid's doing. And then in a way, the kid especially as a high school kid, they might view, well, this kid doesn't do X, Y, and Z, but and then it's kind of the understanding of how the whole process works, and just not taking that lightly and always just having that open conversation with them.
Yeah. It's not a conversation you can you can ever. I don't know. I don't think I ever get used to it necessarily. I know I have to do it, and it's interesting that you kind of brought up about keeping it short, because yeah, I think it almost reminds me of talking to my team after a loss, where I know that if we lose, players don't really want to have a long conversation because they're already not in the mood for it. So we just kind of talk real quick and be done with it. But it's kind of the same way if you're cutting a player. It's like once those words come out, like you said, they're probably done. And so giving them, the short in and out of it, and then giving them that space to talk is probably for the best, because trying to talk in circles or try to give long, lengthy explanations, yeah, I think to your point, right? Players, they kind of checked out once they kind of heard those words, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of the very unfortunate parts of the job. It's I never look forward to it. Even when we've all been there, we know who your team is. and you got to have tryouts. It's never easy.
Mm-hmm. Never, no, for sure. Some things that I've kind of jotted down and been thinking about, coaches. You've kind of shared kind of your insights. I'm curious about how your kind of your practice philosophy has kind of evolved. Now that you've been in the game for a while, you've been coaching for a while. What has kind of your practice planning been in the past, and how has it kind of evolved as you've gotten more experience?
I would say when I first started, kind of going back to controlling what you can control,
Yeah.
like I would try to emulate everything the other team does, try to make sure they're all prepared for every situation. But let's be honest, basketball is a fast-paced, ever-changing game. You can't simulate some of the situations.
Hmm.
And then when you spend so much time worrying about the other opponent, you don't worry about yourself. And cleaning up stuff, maybe you can just work on that'll make you more successful rather than just focusing on what the other team is doing.
Is your amount of like what you like to do in terms of like drill work and skill work, has that changed a lot? Are there like certain drills or certain things you like to run that you've always liked to run? Are there things that you did maybe in the past that you like to do that maybe you don't see as much value or just don't do anymore?
I would say as far as like the varsity coach, say the one thing that I've never changed, and I
Mhm.
think it's always helped me, is I've always still been big on keeping the fundamentals in practice. Still getting whether it's certain shooting reps, and then not just, and then the kind of I add to that is shooting reps, game reps, not just be like, oh, we know this drill, we like this drill, we're gonna do it. Is drills that either emulate your offense or shots you're getting if it's like a shooting drill, and then being able to perfect those drills. And then also, what I do like to do is I have 3 or 4 staple drills that all the kids know amongst all 3 or 4 levels because at the JV varsity modified level, we try to keep everything the same, all the lingo the same, but also you can have different teams and have different levels of ability and then also different coaching abilities amongst the three. So obviously there's things that are like our bread and butter, things we're always going to do. But then also it's just being able to branch off of that. And then also as a varsity coach, really seeing what my JV and modifier are doing, what's working, what's not, whether it's, oh, we're going to do this or, oh, we typically do this, but I like how you do this. And just kind of still just piggybacking off of each other. Because when I was at Pioneer, when I first thought I was a varsity coach, I was young. I was fortunate to have a very experienced JV coach who was a girls coach at that school for many years. His daughter actually played Division 1, so he had a lot of experience. And then I looked at one of my practices compared to his, and I'm like, even though JV to varsity, I'm like, all right, he's just really making it simple. And then obviously his varsity be excited. Oh, we're gonna work on this drill and this drill, and it's like the same thing as teaching. You might plan something at the teacher plan a practice plan, you might only get the half of it. Is really looking at what you need to get done, maximizing your time, and making sure you get all those key points done.
Yeah, it's for me as I hear your answers as well, it kind of made me thinking about, what's kind of changed for me. And man, I remember when I first started, coach, man, I was trying to get so much done. I was trying to cram in like everything I possibly could because I thought that, I had to get through 25, 30 things, maybe not that much, but you get what I'm saying. But now
Yeah,
it's like what's the value, at least for me, at least to try and get through so many things but spend so little time where my players don't really get it or don't really understand it versus like drilling it down to core concepts, core ideas, things that really significantly matter and make sure they get a full understanding of those and a full workout in rather than like trying to rush to cover everything and then my players don't really learn anything from it.
yeah, 100%. And then even I look at myself and I see, all right, we have our 3 or 4 drills. We'll do almost every practice or every other practice are typically, a step after a warm up drill. Obviously, like our dynamic warm up and all that stuff, typically the same. Sometimes we change stuff up, to keep the guys on their toes and whatnot, or add things as the season progresses. But I just look at now, all right, instead of trying to get these 25 drills in, kind of like looking what are the most important things of what I've just planned, what can we get to, how long do we need to spend on it, and realistically, what can I get done? And then the one thing I used to do when I first started was that I'd be like, fine, it's cutting into your scrimmage time, which I would use as motivation for the kids, but also, as a coach, you need that 5-on-5 time with them, even if it's just working on one thing. And then also it's keeping practice engaging for them too. So what I used to always do, I'd always say the 5-on-5 stuff for the end, unless it was like, offensive install or something. Now, a lot of times I'll even plan it in the middle. So then the
Yeah,
kids
I like
kind of,
that.
they know it's different. And then kids probably know this by now. I got to change this up from last year is if we didn't have certain goals for drills, like say we start off with one of our layup drills and we don't reach the goal.
Yeah,
Depending on the practice in the week, there'll be times like, all right, we're staying until we get it. And there'll be times like, all right, we're going to go back to it. They forget about it. And it's the last thing we do. I'll be like, hey, good practice, good job, way to go up. We still got Celtic layups to finish for this time.
yeah,
And then and then a lot of times I've seen it too. I've seen after it's been a long day and then it's not the best rep and we gotta do it again anyways. Or I've seen, all right, they're up, they're practicing, they're like, all right, just this one more thing and we're out.
hmm
So it's also just changing it up and also just being able to kind of read the room and read the kids you have. So for example, last year probably only had one or two kids where basketball was their main. I had a bunch of athletes, like kids. Actually, a couple of my seniors are playing other college sports, and then even some of my incoming ones. I have two pretty good football players. They'll probably be Division 3 or 2 level football players, and a couple of good baseball players. But it's just still keeping them engaged. So, and like kind of going back to us coaches, any drill we would have done back in the day, we probably would have loved. Not every kid's like that, and it's
yeah,
still making them enough for everyone to understand of all like learning levels. And I think that comes with being a teacher is being able to differentiate. All right, well, this kid
yeah,
knows what he's doing. This kid might struggle a little bit. How can we like be at a happy medium here? Because then also to that point, we've all been in that practice where it's the same one or two kids messing up the drill. And then they get on the kid,
yeah,
then other kids get on them, and then morale's kind of low. Sometimes it's a good thing to be able to fight through it, and other times it can be a negative. And also, as being a coach, being able to read the room with that, being like, all right, maybe we go on from this right now.
mm,
So and so's having a tough day. I used to say it's swallowing my pride. I call it now being more of an adult. But it's just being able to read the room and see like, all right, this might just not work today. And that's okay. It's not a reflection of us and me. These are still high school kids. Like they have bad days like you or I as coaches have. We might come into practice, rough day at work and gotta, get up for practice. And some of them, it's the same thing. They are at school all day. They have X, Y, and Z going on, and then they got to get up for practice as well.
it's cool that differentiation. I love that term because I'm a teacher myself. So hearing differentiation, but yeah, like that other part that you mentioned that really stuck out to me, and I've talked to other guests about this, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, is like that desire sometimes to power through a drill or power through something where there's mistakes being done. It's like, no, we got to get this right. We're gonna, use all this time and get it right versus like kind of what you mentioned, right? Just sometimes the it's not getting executed right. Some players are making mistakes on it, and I think that the best thing to do sometimes is just let it go for a bit, right? And then come back to it later. And I think that kind of getting rid of that or releasing that stubbornness a little bit probably will save you and your team probably a lot of stress in the future.
Oh yeah, and then going back to our point about not fitting stuff in the practice, there's times like, all right, well, I just spent 35 minutes on this drill and I only had 10 minutes down for it. And then as
Yeah,
a coach, you get ticked off, and it's just you can't expect more of your kids than they expected themselves in the beginning. I think.
yeah,
Obviously, as we go on, we empower them. We, instill confidence in them, and then as the season goes on, things are going well. And even if you may not have the best record, usually kids grow in some aspect of the season.
hmm
Because for some of them, it's the only time of year where they're touching a ball 5 to 6 days a week for 4 months.
mm.
And you
Yeah,
gotta keep that. You gotta keep that in mind too.
yeah. Especially when like you said, you got players that are not just sole basketball players. They're doing a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, and I almost think as much as I'm a basketball nut, and I try to open a gym as much as possible. I remember still like maybe sometimes like less is more. Sometimes,
Yeah,
all right, these are your 2 days a week of this. And as a coach, that's how I tried selling it. Like, hey, the gym's open this many days. And I would be like, I realistically want you guys to here these days. So
hmm
like some of my varsity guys that, worked, played football, I'd be like, hey man, I know you can't make everything, but here, this is the day where it's usually just varsity only. And then here's our dates of some scrimmages or teams coming to work out with us. Please try your best to be there. And then I got a good response from like a lot of those kids. And then the kids that are everything won't miss a thing.
Yeah, and,
You
and
know,
and your players know that you're kind of respecting them and the fact that they're super busy and have a lot going on, that you're not trying to, force them to say, no, you better be here every single day and burning them out when they're already doing a whole bunch of other stuff physically.
yeah, exactly. And then even this year, like I will say, I think some people might realistically we had open gym in the summer 4 days a week. Our varsity played in 2 leagues, our JV played in 1 league, and then we'd have scrimmages.
Mm,
Some people from the outside saw us a lot, but when I had 13 to 15 kids and I had JV kids, I would just play varsity half the time because they're in the gym all the time. And that
right.
was kind of my reward for them. Like, hey, if you're gonna show up to everything, you're gonna play varsity. And then also what I did this year was I to the JV team and almost all of them, except for someone that played multiple sports, took the advantage of it. There was a lot of times we needed varsity guys. Sometimes you just call the same 2 or 3 because they'll be there. I gave a lot of kids that maybe even aren't varsity ready a chance to play a summer league game.
Mm,
I saw it. 2 years, some of you are going to be playing together, so you got to get used to it now. 2, just seeing how committed they are, just to see and to see how they're on kind of the excitement too. Like some of the kids that were, some of our freshmen last year didn't play much on JV that were in the gym all summer. I gave them the, green light to come to varsity, and you just kind of almost saw a change in demeanor too. So it's
yeah.
almost like in a way showing hey, your guy 13 on JV, the varsity coach is still thinking about you in 2 years. It's showing that we're just a program and not just showing I care about my team. Because I'll
Yeah.
be honest, last year my team lost the most of the 3 levels. I'll be completely
Yeah.
honest.
Uh-huh.
I always joke
Been
that
there.
one of the younger coaches might have to take my job. I would joke with that with people, but and it's just learning from that, and then even just accepting all right, so I have, for example, for my team coming up, I have a couple kids where basketball is their main thing, but also some of my starters are just straight up athletes that play everything,
Mhm.
and just finding a way to make them successful, and then also keeping them around and engaged. And I think this year, me and my staff did a good job. Like I said, we had some football guys that are kind of in and out, but we also had a lot of guys that played multiple sports that didn't miss a thing.
Mm,
So it's just kind
yeah.
of it's almost looking at the pluses and minuses of who's there, and just like I said, going overall is all right. These kids are in the gym today.
Yeah. No, no, that's really funny to kind of think about or kind of be like reflective about is, I'm thinking about some of those tough seasons of mine that I've had where sometimes it's like, man, like all 3 levels are really struggling. It's like, man, am I like doing anything right and everything like that, and my confidence kind of wavers, like you said, or well, I don't know if your confidence wavers. I know
Yeah,
mine
I've
did
been
when
there
I
a
first started because
hundred
I was like,
percent.
boy, I look like I've never coached before. Like, the whole program's kind of struggling, but then like at least for me, I know I had to kind of like zoom out and kind of look at the bigger picture and know that, hey, like one game or one practice or whatever is not like reflective of everything. Look at what we're building step by step. And I know I've had to do that sometimes to kind of get myself mentally on track.
The way I kind of look at it is don't coach basketball like a football coach. Football,
Yeah.
even though some might not matter as much, it you lose one game, it could ruin your season. Basketball,
Hmm.
granted, you don't want to lose certain ones. Like for example, us, we play 5 games before Christmas. Our first 3 are non-league, 2 are league games. So if we go into Christmas 3-2, and 2 of those losses are non-league games, our league games. My fault. I'm probably really ticked off. But also,
Hmm.
yeah, look at it. That's still a long season. The winter
Yeah.
sports season is one of the longest seasons. If you're going to dwell on every loss or every mistake that's going on or everything that's going wrong, it's going to burn you out.
Yeah.
And that's
You're
one
not gonna
thing I
last too
learned.
long.
I used to take every loss, every parent complaint, every even just hearing something in the crowd saying you should. I used to take it all personally.
Hmm. Oh
To the
yeah.
point where I would just sit there and be like, well, what am I doing wrong? And it'd make me self reflect almost in a destructive way. It's
Right.
you got to have thick skin. You know there's going to be people. You can go 20-2 and win a sectional title. And you can have people still thinking you're doing things wrong.
Hmm.
Or
You're
there's
never gonna
always
make
going to
everyone
be
happy.
yes. You're not in this business to make friends and make people happy. You're in it to help the kids.
Hmm.
And that's just
Definitely.
the one thing. Because for me, I'm big on culture and team bonding and being part of the community. But also, you gotta look back and be like, all right, well, if you're gonna do all that, it's gonna put you in certain situations as well.
Right.
And just seeing how it all is, and just also just stick true to yourself. the outside noise affect the team? Because let's be honest, if I'm letting outside noise affect me, pick up on that.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. Everyone
I can
else will
take
notice. Your players will.
an example from when I was at Pioneer, well, the one parent interaction I talked about. The kids all knew because the guy did have a reputation in all sports kind of being like that. So realistically, I probably had nothing to worry about, but I think the kids could tell it bothered me.
Mm.
And it didn't bother me because, and I look at it now as an adult, it should have bothered me more for how it was impacting the kid. If the kid knows his parent is, causing issues with the coach and other people are talking about it, it's what's going on with that kid. That he or she's probably not in the right good mental space at that point. Where I felt as a younger coach, I was more focused on, oh well, this guy's complaining about me, blah blah blah. I did nothing wrong. It's very fortunate to be where I've been. Very fortunate to get my first varsity coaching job at 23. But I will honestly say this: I'm happy I did it. I got it the way I did it, and I've gone through my journey because I think if I would have had more, we'll say natural, get hired by one district, stay there, and move up, I don't know if I'd still have the same mentality I do now because I kind of had to go through the negatives to get to the positives.
Yeah, and you've had so many different stops and so many different things happen to you that you had to kind of adjust to and adapt to, so to speak.
Yeah, and just being able to adapt in this profession is huge.
Yeah.
Even as a teacher or a coach, they're ever changing. Policies and rules are ever changing. Like for
Yeah.
example, we have a whole new booster club procedure we're working through right now. It's been a headache of mine. So that's just like one and that's not even related to the on-court coaching.
Mm.
Then you always have your one or two people that might not agree with everything you do and are vocal about it, and you just have to
Yeah.
learn how to tune that out because it's
Yeah.
like when a team's being chippy with your team or maybe talking some junk and you tell them to block it out and they say, well, I can't. Well, if they know the coach can't block out things, it's kind of like the same thing. Acting, if the coach is acting like a fool towards a ref, what are the kids going to do?
What are the kids doing? Yeah. 100% agree. Coach, I want to ask one more question before hitting concluding segment because I think this is something really important to bring up, which is since you've been on different sides of the coaching profession, now that you're more established in the head coaching role, what do you look for in assistants? What do you look for in what you want them to do? How do you put them in positions where they're going to be successful, where they have a voice? How is that kind of adapted and changed throughout the years? And where do you kind of put your assistants at now where they can be the most successful?
So this is one thing I really had to learn. So when I was an assistant, I was the one that, okay, who can go scout this game? I want to do it. All right, I'm not going to be here for summer workouts. Who can run it? First one to do it. Because I think that's just what I was kind of raised to do was just, I dive into something, I'm committed. And not every coach is the same way. It's probably why I've gotten to the level I'm at in the varsity level. But not every JV or modified coach goal is to be the varsity coach. Like, for example, my JV coach is a phenomenal coach. I think he'd be a hell of a varsity coach, but I think he just loves coaching JV. And that's cool. And I just had to sit there and learn. And like with the staff I have now, very involved in the summer. They're very great with the kids. And honestly, with our staff, I'm actually the oldest at 30. So we're looking like we can build something for a while. Between our JV coach is a year younger than me, and our modified coach is 26. So we have a young staff. We're all teachers in the building, all known in the district. So I've looked at now as like, all right, I have very special staff right now. Is
Yeah.
their experience. Like my JV coach is a 4-year Division III player, very good coach. He's entering his 4th season, and then my modified coach who used to help run the rec basketball and is an elementary teacher in the district. He has also ran the rec and done all that. So I have guys from different experiences, and what I've kind of learned to do is let them do their own thing, the same structure of what you have planned for the kids. So, like for example, we run the same offenses and stuff, but I tell them whatever wrinkle you want to put in, whatever. If you think it's something varsity will do, show me. And it's just being open in that communication. And then also, I'm involved. Like I'm bringing a national AAU program to Buffalo. I just got hired to do that last month. It's called Pro Steels Basketball. It's actually ran by 2 of Stephen Curry's college teammates. So I'm our state director. So we got to start, planning AAU teams and camps on like top of my NT team. I'm using it to help build my NT program. But
Yeah.
also I offer them things like, hey, do you want to come work this clinic to kind of get your stuff, like to kind of practice, do whatever, get it juices flowing. And sometimes and whenever they're available, they do. But when they don't, it's not like, I think if I was younger, I would take it more personally, like, oh, we need people here. But no, it's coaches have lives, coaches have their own things, coaches have their own way of doing things. And I would say I was never one that judged or did it, but also I would get frustrated because I thought everyone had to have my mentality. And if you look at a team, not everyone has the same mentality. So,
Yeah.
like I'll say, if you had, like, probably for lack of a better word, I can't think of anything really better. I'm more of an alpha as a coach. I take the initiative. I want to run all the stuff. I know what's expected, and I take full responsibility for all the. So, like, for example, if the JV coach can't be there, I know I'm going to be at summer league. I'm not trying to pawn that off on someone else. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But then,
Absolutely.
then also I understand, like, I'll be like, hey, for example, another example was we had our coaches showcase today. They needed the coaches. I asked my coaches, they were unavailable. That's not a problem to me. I know some coaches might have an issue with that because we're trying to represent our program, but I believe in my coaches. Their off season's their time. I'm the head of the program. They like, for example, they cover their summer leagues and they run their workouts and align to mine. Usually we're together anyways. But also I've kind of taken the role of, all right, it falls on me. If no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to empower them to do their own thing and kind of want to be here and want to work with me. And I think the three of us all being younger, me and my JV coach actually played against each other in high school, and having that relationship, and also just being open with them and just saying, here's what I really need, guys. And then if you want to do this, go right ahead. I will probably be there doing this. It's not an expectation. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think
No,
I've
100%.
seen it in other staffs where it's like the coaches they want them at everything, blah, blah, blah. And we've all been there. But then also I see it where how I empower them is the type of controlling where, like, summer league, I have to be there. Got married this summer. I was gone for 2 weeks. My JV coaches handled all the leagues and workouts, and they had a great time. And
Awesome.
also, I'm a believer too, is that it just can't hear me the whole time.
Yeah, I think
Even if
that's
it's
huge. Continue.
basketball, it's just, I think it's huge. And then this year, we're fortunate we're going to have a few assistants and stuff. And then I really try to
Nice.
get them to take the lead and even run drills and practice, because I had a very good friend of mine. He's actually going to be my opening game this year, Joe Pollock from Roy Hart, where I first coached boys. That was the one thing I learned from him. He fire right away. He wrote his practice plan. He goes, Juergens lead. I'm like, I don't even know this drill. And then, like, but like, he kept me on my toes. And then also he had me, like, because he was big on scouting reports, kind of like I am. He'd have me go scout and he'd have me explain the scouting report. Is also, he saw what role I was in and what I wanted to do, and he gave me those. And then we had an assistant who was just kind of doing it as an internship and still coaches like youth level, but wasn't, he didn't want to be, a high school varsity coach. So, and
Right.
he had kind of, like, I don't want to say different expectations because we had the same expectations, but he was given different roles to where he was successful and how he could help the kids. And now I look at it, I look at my staff now from assistants, JV modified. I look at, all right, what did they do well to help our program as a whole? And then, like, when it even comes to the varsity bench. So, for example, my JV coach, he's kind of my right hand man about things, but also he's really good with the kids. I have a player of mine from Pioneer who's going to be my assistant this year. And so that's kind of a cool full circle moment now, because
That's
I was a
cool.
young
Yeah.
coach with him, and now he's actually my age when I was coaching
That's
him.
cool.
And actually, him and one of my other players were actually at my wedding this summer. So seeing that relationship, like, he's probably going to be like, I'm going to probably want him next to me and talk to him. I'm still going to rely on the JV coach. But I'm probably going to put him in that seat next to me because he wants to coach, he wants to grow. And then also, my JV coach knows all the kids as being a teacher and coaching them. I might put him in the middle because he'll be able to handle all the kids and explain things to him that sometimes in the game I can't explain.
Mhm. I think it's cool
Modified.
to like. I want to just say that I think it's great to like have that awareness of knowing that what you want isn't necessarily the same as like your assistants or those under you, and that that you can't expect them to have that same level of commitment or there or want to be there or have aspirations to be a varsity coach. I think that's awesome to have a JV coach that's perfectly happy with being a JV coach and loves doing that, because to have a coach who's passionate about coaching at that level versus like they're just doing it but really waiting for a varsity job, that makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah, and especially with my JV and modified coach. And I'm sure, like, even some of them, if they got the chance to do varsity, would I think they might do it? Probably. I really don't talk to them about it because they do their
Mhm.
job and they're happy with what they do, and they're a great addition to the staff. I will say, is being able to lead a staff like that now, and then being told like, "Oh, I loved having you as an assistant because you did this," and just seeing the differences in it, and now just being able to look back and reflect, like, okay, it's everyone's going to have a role in some respect.
Yeah, everyone.
And for
Yeah,
example, our one assistant reps too, so he's kind of just like he can get us a gym like off season and kind of be around a little bit. He's not going to be there every day. You know what I mean? And then we have people who are there every day. And
Mhm.
then also because you kind of hear you don't want too many hands in the pot, but also you kind of got to take the philosophy of, well, you got to look at everyone's experience. So if I look at my staff, me as a 30-year-old now entering my 13th coaching season, I consider myself a lot of experience, but I don't know everything. I really don't. I'll be the first to admit it. And then my JV coach, having about 4 or 5 years his playing experience, he we are on the same page about a lot. But then there's times where he brings a point up to me, and even my modified coach, who is only entering a second year coaching at the school level, but has coached rec ball for years. I even see because he's kind of a more fundamental approach, and also because he wants to grow and learn as a coach, he'll give a lot more insight on what's going on, like offensively or defensively, because he's also trying to learn.
Mhm.
And I'll say, like, my modified coach, the one time I felt bad asking him to cover a game, he's like, no, I love doing it. I love seeing like what you're doing. And I like kind of just, kind of be able to get his own voice in his craft and kind of see different things. And then I have assistants. So where one, uh, parent of one of our players, but has always been like one of the youth coaches and wants to like coach more often now, trying to actually kind of make a living out of it on top of his of his business he runs. So like now you have a whole different aspect of it. You have a
Mhm.
dude that's like kind of built these kids up,
Yeah.
and then also even a guy does our table. He's one of my players' parents, and he used to coach for years. He's just an older. He's been there a while, coached for years, wants to kind of be dad, but also he's our staff to an extent because he does our bulk, he does all that, and I have him in the locker room at halftime. Sometimes he
Man,
doesn't even talk
that's
to the
awesome.
kids. Sometimes he doesn't even talk to the kids. Sometimes it's just a quick conversation, like, "Hey, this is
Yeah.
what I see." And I like greatly appreciate it. And I think also, and kind of going back to adjusting, is when I was younger and I had someone that maybe I wasn't like on my staff telling me something to do, I might sit there and be like, "What are you doing?" But also I see it because as you've gotten older and experience, I see you can almost see what's genuine help and what's help in negative ways. And I've been fortunate in the staff I have in this past year I've been there is that everyone's been trying to help in a positive way that's involved, and that's huge. That's even more
Yeah.
important than having people that know every X's and O's and that everything. Is people that helps in the right place and the heart's in the right place and are trying just to help the kids be successful.
Appreciate the thorough answer, Coach. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love the way that you're able to incorporate all your staff members to build your program. That's fantastic. To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I kind of two questions. Oops, I almost did the second one first. Two questions I give every guest. First one, and you've shared a lot already, so hopefully you have another that you don't mind sharing, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is another moment? What is one more moment that you think you could share with our listeners that by sharing it, you think that they would be able to learn from?
I will say that Pioneer, just going back to coaching with emotion over brains.
Mm,
I admit I was a fan favorite because I was animated, intense. They loved it, but I look back on games where I'm like, all right, if I would have just calmed down for 5 seconds, I would have saw this, or I would have saw this differently. And then I would just kind of to add to that is be someone you're not. I'll admit when I first started coaching, I was trying to be someone I was not. And
mhm.
now as obviously maturity factors growing to my own as a teacher, a coach, and even you could say as a man, I look back and things I do view things differently. Do I regret anything I've ever done as a coach? No. It made me who I am today. Did I think I ever did anything like, oh my God, egregiously wrong? No, it was never anything like that. But it's like, all right, I look at my demeanor, how I approach things, and just how it's positive, and also how I approach things, and then just coaching to who I truly am and just showing that genuine side, I think that builds trust within your team. So instead of sitting there thinking I have to be this animated, lack of a better word, like drill sergeant, like thinking up, like, yelling, berating, it's all right. This is who he is. He's genuine with who he is and how he's coaching. And also it's kind of, you got to coach and adapt to the times were. 20, 30 years ago, every coach could be irate and there wasn't really issues probably.
Yeah.
Now, you can be irate and almost be in the, have a reason for being it. It could still be viewed as negative. And it can still cause problems for you. So just really taking that is just like who you are. Don't try to force anything into your coaching philosophy that you're not. Obviously, there's probably circumstances where, all right, you need to have more discipline with your team, blah, blah, blah. Like, obviously, stuff is like coaching flaws, but just stay true to who you are. And I think this year with, the quick coaching change, a lot, the kids didn't know me, but just being open and genuine about who I was and they saw that and they saw me putting the work in. I think that saved some problems we could have had because we weren't the most successful team. We had our struggles. We had our issues at practices and after games. Like don't worry. We had some ups and downs, but I also look at we grew and we in some of our wins were very good wins and top it off. We had a tough schedule too. Of our 14 losses, some were to the same teams twice. Those teams were in the sectional Final Fours, and we weren't. So we have to look. I was also being realistic. Like, all right, we played some good competition too. We weren't just that struggled to play basketball and just couldn't figure it out. Yes, there was probably that to an extent and things we could have done better, but also we played tough competition while trying to figure out, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, got to give yourself some grace, right? You got to be able to respect what you did do and not just always focus on the scoreboard.
Sure.
Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call this 60-second soapbox. We can go over 60 seconds because I don't time anyone. I just like to put catchy names to things, but I like to use it kind of as a platform for you to get out a final thought, a closing idea, a closing message, something that you want to leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction you wish, basketball, coaching, or otherwise. So, Coach, one more time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor here and kind of let you take it away with your soapbox.
Yeah, so for my little soapbox, I think the biggest thing is make sure you're in this profession for the right reasons. If just because you are, a good player and people think you could coach or you want to coach for whatever reason, for the glory, all that, that's not what this is for. At the end of the day, when you're a coach, it's not about you, it's about the kids. It's about the kids, the program, the community, and all that. And let's be honest, there's times where we don't have the kids to win no matter what we do. But, it's not the NBA where we have salary caps. I mean, college and high school can kind of get the transfer portal like NIL now. We've all experienced that. But you have to just, like I said, it's going back to staying true to how you are and just it's for the kids and coach for the kids. And then when you stay true to who you are and you coach for the kids, I think that just builds trust and then other things will come. So like this year, one thing I'm focusing on personally for myself is, and this is going to sound crazy, that's what I say, is like sideline conduct. Because last year I didn't get a technical foul or anything or something like that, but I showed frustration by the end of the year because we were struggling. It wasn't negative frustration. It wasn't like I stopped coaching, but it's like, all right, people can tell I'm frustrated. They can tell I'm getting after it. So it's like, if I'm showing I'm frustrated and the kids are already frustrated because we're not doing X, Y, and Z, well, it's going to trickle down. And just staying true to just who you are and just, like I said, focusing on the kids. And then you do that, and then you have, your skill and knowledge as a, player, coach, and that will all kind of come together. And then just, like I said, I've been kind of saying this a lot, but going back to staying true to who you are, you look at it, don't think you have to be somebody you're not, or don't think you have to run this offense or do this. You look at your team more objectively and you put them more in a position to succeed.
No, that's fantastic. What a great way to end it. And I love that whole part about the sideline demeanor. I think that I've mentioned this before. If you're able to kind of film yourself coaching and just watch kind of yourself and your behavior and conduct. There's a lot to learn from that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And Coach, I really want to thank you. This has been phenomenal. You've shared so much, and I know with the amount of younger listeners and newer listeners, even older ones that I have, that there's a lot that they can take from and learn from. So Coach, I know that it was a little bit of a struggle last year, but you're building something great, and it's really exciting to hear how much you've learned as you have grown, obviously, so much as you continue on your journey, and there's so much more that you're going to continue to do. So Coach Juergens, man, keep at it, keep doing what it is that you're doing, and hopefully it's a great, successful year this year.
Hope so for you too. Thank you, Coach.
And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.